You're too dumb to succeed. My family laughed when I started my own business. Today, they begged me for a job when their company went bankrupt. They always said I'd never amount to anything. I can still hear my father's voice, low and dismissive, as he leaned back in his leather chair, waving a hand as if I wasn't worth the conversation. You don't have the brains for business, son. Some people are meant to lead, and some people, well, they just take orders. My mother, ever the enabler, would chime in with her usual tight-lipped smile. Sweetheart, maybe you should just stick to something simpler? Something more stable? And then, of course, my older brother, Daniel, would add the finishing touch, slapping me on the back like he was giving me a reality check. Come on, Matt. You couldn't even keep that part-time job at the auto shop. What makes you think you can run your own company? They laughed when I told them I was quitting my job to start a business. They laughed even harder when I asked if they wanted to invest. Matt, you're too dumb to succeed. My sister, Rachel, snorted over dinner. Just admit it now and save yourself the humiliation. That was 3 years ago. 3 years of struggle, of empty bank accounts, of failures that made me question if they were right. But I never forgot their laughter. And now? Now they were calling me. Because their untouchable family business, the one they had always lorded over me, was crumbling. Bankrupt. Gone. And they needed a job. They needed me. It started with whispers. I wasn't in contact with my family much after I started my business, more out of necessity than choice. I was too busy working 16-hour days, pouring everything I had into my company while they sat comfortably in their high-rise office, running the family business like they always had. But I still heard things. A friend from town mentioned layoffs at Holloway and Company, my father's company, the one he built from the ground up and prided himself on. I didn't think much of it at first. Companies downsized all the time. Then I overheard someone at a coffee shop talking about Holloway and Company losing a major contract. A huge one. That got my attention. I did a little digging. Turns out, they weren't just struggling, they were hemorrhaging money. The once mighty company my father had spent decades building was crumbling under the weight of its own arrogance. And it all made sense. My family had always believed they were too good to fail. Too big, too successful, too smart to ever make the kind of mistakes that could bring them down. But the world was changing, and they weren't. They stuck to their old ways, refusing to innovate, dismissing new trends, and scoffing at competitors who adapted. Meanwhile, my business, the one they said would never work, was growing. Slowly, painfully, but growing nonetheless. And then, one night, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. It had been nearly 2 years since I last spoke to her, and the last words she said to me were, "You'll regret this, Matthew. You'll come crawling back." But I wasn't the one crawling. I let it ring a few more times before answering. "Hello?" There was a pause. Then, in the softest voice I'd ever heard from her, she said, "Matt, we need to talk." There was something in her voice I didn't recognize. Not the usual passive-aggressive superiority. Not the tight, polite condescension she usually reserved for me. No, this was different. This was uncertainty. "Talk about what?" I asked, keeping my voice even. She hesitated, and for the first time in my life, I wondered if she was nervous to speak to me. Finally, she sighed. "It's about the company." I leaned back in my chair, suppressing a smirk. "Here it is." "What about it?" "Things have gotten complicated." I waited. Let her squirm. "Your father." She stopped herself. Took a breath. "We've had some setbacks, and we might need a little help." I couldn't help it, I laughed. A short, sharp laugh that made her go silent on the other end. "You need help? From me?" A few years ago, I might have jumped at the chance to prove myself to them. To finally hear them say, "You were right, Matt. We should have believed in you." But that was the old me. The one who wanted their approval. The one who spent years being the family joke. I wasn't that guy anymore. "I don't know what to tell you, Mom," I said, feigning innocence. "I thought you said I was too dumb to run a business?" She let out a shaky breath. "I know things were said, but that's in the past. We're family, Matthew. That has to count for something. Ah, there it was. The guilt trip. The same one they'd used my whole life whenever they needed something from me. I wasn't falling for it this time. I'm sorry you're struggling, I said, but you made it very clear that I had no place in your world. You were right about one thing, though, I did succeed. Without you. Silence. Then, in the softest voice I'd ever heard from her. Please, Matthew. Just come see your father. I should have hung up. I wanted to hang up. But something inside me, maybe morbid curiosity, maybe something else, made me say, I'll think about it. And then I ended the call. I don't know why I agreed to go. Maybe part of me wanted to see it for myself, to witness the empire my father had built crumbling before my eyes. Maybe I just wanted to hear them say it, to finally admit they'd been wrong about me. Or maybe, deep down, there was still a part of me that wanted something from them. Not their approval. Not their love. But closure. When I pulled up to my parents' estate, the same house where I had spent years being ridiculed, I noticed something immediately. It didn't look the same. The immaculate lawn, once perfectly trimmed and lined with expensive landscaping, was overgrown. The luxury cars that used to fill the driveway were gone, replaced by a single aging sedan. For the first time, the house felt small. I knocked on the door, and after a moment, it opened to reveal my mother. She looked older. More tired. The perfectly polished woman I remembered had been replaced by someone whose mask was slipping. Matthew, she breathed, as if she was afraid I'd vanish if she blinked. Mom. I stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet. My father's booming voice was nowhere to be heard, and that alone told me how bad things had gotten. She led me to his office, and there he was, sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, looking small in the oversized chair that once made him seem so powerful. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then, finally, he said, You look well. I almost laughed. That's how he starts. Yeah, I said. Turns out I'm not as dumb as you thought. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. That was already a win. I sat down across from him, leaning back in the chair waiting. Let's hear it, old man. We need your help. There it was. 3 words I never thought I'd hear from my father. The company is in trouble, he continued, clearing his throat like it physically pained him to admit it. We made some miscalculations. Took some risks that didn't pan out. And now, he exhaled heavily, we're losing everything. You don't say. He ignored my sarcasm. I know we've had our differences, Matthew. But you've built something for yourself. Something successful. And we were hoping. Stop. I held up a hand. Just say it. You need money. Silence. Then, finally, he nodded. Not just money. My mother cut in quickly. The company needs leadership. A fresh perspective. We thought, maybe you could help us rebuild. I stared at them. The same people who laughed at me. Who told me I was destined to fail. Who cut me off without a second thought when I chose my own path. And now, here they were, practically begging me to save them. For years, I had dreamed of this moment. Fantasized about what I'd say if they ever came crawling back. And now that it was here, I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt done. I took a slow breath, looked my father in the eye, and said the one word I knew he had never expected to hear from me. No. His face fell. My mother let out a sharp breath. Matthew, please. She tried again. We can fix this. No, Mom, I repeated, standing up. You can't fix this. And I'm not going to be the one to clean up your mess. My father clenched his jaw. So that's it? You're just going to walk away? Like you walked away from me? I shot back. He had no response to that. I turned and headed for the door. Just before I left, I glanced back one last time. Good luck, I said. You're going to need it. And then, for the first time in my life, I walked out of that house with my head held high. I expected them to call again. I expected angry messages, desperate pleas, maybe even a last-ditch guilt trip about how family sticks together. But instead, silence. And somehow, that was even more satisfying. I went back to my life, back to my company, the one they swore would never succeed. Business was booming, and every day was a reminder that I had built something real. Something of my own. A week passed. Then 2. And then, one evening, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in years. Daniel. My older brother. The golden child. The heir to my father's throne. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Well, 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 I said. Didn't expect to hear from you. Matt, he said, his voice tight. We need to talk. You're about 2 weeks late for that conversation. I know, he admitted. But this is different. I leaned back in my chair, curious despite myself. All right. I'll bite. What's so urgent? There was a long pause. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, he said, Dad had a stroke. The words hit me harder than I expected. For a moment, I didn't say anything. Is he? He's alive, Daniel said quickly. But it's bad. He's in the hospital. Mom's a wreck. And the company, he sighed. It's over, Matt. They filed for bankruptcy this morning. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. The empire had officially fallen. I just thought you should know, Daniel continued, his tone shifting. And look, I get it. I know how they treated you. I know you don't owe them anything. But maybe... I could hear the hesitation in his voice. Maybe just come see him. I opened my mouth to say no. To tell him I was done. That I had nothing left to give. But the words didn't come. Instead, after a long pause, I simply said, I'll think about it. And for the second time in 2 weeks, I hung up on my family. I told myself I wasn't going. That I didn't owe them anything. That this wasn't my problem. But for the next 2 days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The image of my father, once the most powerful man I knew, lying helpless in a hospital bed. The company he had built, the one he sacrificed everything for, now reduced to nothing. I wasn't sure if I felt pity, satisfaction, or something in between. On the 3rd day, I got in my car and drove to the hospital. I told myself I wasn't doing it for him. I wasn't doing it for my mother, or for Daniel, or to ease some kind of guilt I didn't even think I had. I just needed to see it. To see him. When I walked into the hospital room, my mother was sitting by his bed, her hands folded in her lap. She looked up when she saw me, her eyes red and tired. Matthew, she whispered, as if she didn't quite believe I was real. My father, once a man who could command a room with his presence alone, looked small. Pale. Frail. He turned his head slightly when he saw me. For the first time in my life, my father looked at me, really looked at me, and there was no arrogance in his eyes. No disappointment. Just exhaustion. You came, he rasped. I nodded but said nothing. My mother sniffled. He's been asking for you. I raised an eyebrow. That I hadn't expected. My father shifted, struggling to sit up, but he was too weak. His hand trembled slightly on the blanket. I had never seen him look so human. I was wrong about you, he said finally. The words hung in the air between us. My mother looked at me, hopeful, waiting for me to say something. Maybe even to forgive him. But I didn't. Because I didn't come here for him. I know, I said. And then I turned and walked out. I walked out of that hospital room without looking back. I didn't owe him anything, not my forgiveness, not my sympathy, not even my anger. He had spent his entire life underestimating me, dismissing me, treating me like I was a disappointment. And now, in his weakest moment, he wanted to rewrite history? No. I wasn't going to let him. As I stepped out into the hospital corridor, I spotted Daniel leaning against the wall, arms crossed. He had the same look on his face that he always did growing up, the one that said he thought he was the responsible brother, the one who kept things together. That's it? He asked as I walked past him. What else is there to say? He sighed, rubbing his temples. Matt, he admitted he was wrong. Isn't that what you wanted? I stopped. Turned to him. No, Daniel. What I wanted was for him to believe in me when it mattered. Not when he had no other choice. Daniel looked away, jaw tight. He knew I was right. I took a deep breath. I know this is hard for you, I said, softening slightly. But this isn't my fight anymore. I built something for myself. Without him. Without any of you. And I'm not going to let him drag me back into his mess just because he finally realized I wasn't the failure he thought I was. Daniel didn't argue. He just nodded, almost approvingly. So that's it then, he muttered. You're done with all of us? I thought about that for a second. I don't know, I admitted. But I know I'm done being the one no one believed in. And with that I walked away from the family that had doubted me, away from the weight of their expectations, away from the shadow of a name I no longer needed. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. The drive home was quiet. No music, no distractions, just the hum of the road and my own thoughts. I had spent my whole life chasing something I thought I needed. Their approval. Their validation. The acknowledgement that I was worth something. But standing in that hospital room, looking at my father, the man who once made me feel small, I realized something. I didn't need it anymore. I had built my own future. I had proven them wrong. And most importantly, I had done it without them. My phone buzzed as I pulled into my driveway. A message from my mother. Mom, I hope you reconsider. We still need you. Still. Even after everything, she wasn't asking if I wanted to be part of their lives, only if I could be useful to them. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then, without hesitation, I blocked her number. And just like that, the last chain binding me to the past was gone. I stepped inside my house, the home I had bought with my own money, earned from the business they said would never succeed. I looked around, letting the silence settle over me. This wasn't a mansion like the one I grew up in. It wasn't extravagant. But it was mine. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. For the first time in years, I felt light. No weight of expectations. No lingering resentment. Just a quiet, steady certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be. I woke up the next morning to a few missed calls from Daniel. I didn't need to listen to the voicemails to know what they said. Dad's condition is getting worse. Mom wants you to reconsider. It's not too late to help. I deleted them all without listening. It was too late. It had been too late the moment they laughed in my face, the moment they turned their backs on me when I needed them most. They had made their choice. And now, I was making mine. I threw myself back into work, focusing on the company I had built from the ground up. Every day was another reminder that I had been right to walk away, that I had never needed their approval to succeed. A few weeks later, I got the inevitable news. My father had passed away. No dramatic final words. No last-minute reconciliation. Just an ending. I didn't go to the funeral. I thought about it, about whether I owed him that much, about whether I should at least show my face one last time. But the truth was, I had already said my goodbye. I had said it the moment I walked out of that hospital room. Instead, I spent the day exactly the way I wanted to. I went into the office, met with my team, sat in the corner office that I had earned. The one that was supposed to be Daniel's. The one that should have never belonged to me, according to my father. And yet there I was. A few days later, I got an email from a lawyer handling my father's estate. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity got the better of me. The email was short. Straight to the point. My father had left me nothing. Not a cent. Not a piece of property. Not even a symbolic, meaningless heirloom. I laughed. Of course he did. Even from the grave, he wanted to have the last word. What he didn't realize was that he already had. When I had told him no. I closed the email and never thought about it again. There was a time when that would have crushed me, being written out of his will, erased like I never mattered. But now, it felt like confirmation. I had never been part of his legacy. And I never needed to be. Because I had built my own. Months passed. Life moved on. My business thrived. I hired good people, expanded into new markets, and watched my company grow into something real, something mine. And one day, as I sat in my office, looking out over the city, my phone buzzed with another call from Daniel. This time, I didn't even hesitate. I just hit decline. And then I got back to work. Because unlike them, I knew the truth. Success wasn't about who you came from. It was about who you chose to become. And I had already won.